morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. And I greet you live from on and where around the world of the United States of America, where we talk about global affairs, innovation, and increasingly turbulent world politically. And I greet you from North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America. Today, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is on his way to Israel. He arrived in Israel on Monday as part of a trip to the Middle East, where he will be holding meetings with Israel's Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. Secretary Austin is going to basically press the government to scale back on their intense bombings and military operations in the hopes that we can at least get to some aspect of a ceasefire. Earlier strikes killed about 110 people, and over 18,000 Palestinians have died in the conflict. Chileans rejected a constitutional amendment or referendum which would have basically significantly reduced the state's role and opened Chile's abortion law up to legal challenges. We'll talk about that a little bit. Britain's government said it would introduce a carbon levy on imported carbon goods by 2027. And what is interesting is that the COP28 summit was held last week, finished up last week, and there was really a call for governments to really transition away from fossil fuels, also doubling down on renewable energy. At the end of the day, I still think it's going to take quite a lot of work for all of us to get to net zero carbon emission. And one thing we're going to start talking about this show is clean tech innovation and the kinds of innovations and technologies that even Bill Gates talks about in his book, How to Prevent a Climate Disaster, which is something very interesting for all of us, wherever we are around the world. And finally, Serbia's president claimed victory in a parliamentary election on Sunday after some projections showed that his Progressive Party would win 47% of the vote. I've touched on all the major issues. I may have missed a few items. Everyone's getting ready for the NFL playoffs. Looking like the Philadelphia Eagles headed to another Super Bowl, maybe the 49ers. And the Chiefs having some problems where they pulled out a victory yesterday, but all things are open with the Baltimore Ravens looking very ready for another Super Bowl appearance, with Lamar Jackson maybe headed on his way to become the MVP this year of the National Football League. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I'm here for a few minutes, and then I'm going to try to make it back. Got a migraine headache today, so I'm going to go take a little rest. But Mark, let's go ahead and get started.
Glad to get started with you. As you said, a lot is going on in the world, and we'll probably get to some of that as well. I know we've got Rick Rosner, we've got Nick Palveda, and actually I have a friend of mine that has actually got a son of theirs in a championship game. Nick Palveda may be interested to know this, but there is actually a championship game being played today at noon here in Durham, North Carolina. So the NAIA championship will be taking place here at County Stadium and all along those lines. So I think this is a rematch of last year's championship, but one of the teams, I think from Kaiser, Florida, if I remember correctly, is actually in that championship game.
Is it a football?
It's football. It's college football. And
Cool.
definitely, like I said, it is a team, I think, from the like the South Dakota, northern Iowa, or one of that areas, but they're playing at noon. And Lewis Everhart, who is the son of Jess Everhart, and Jess Everhart is both a friend of mine and Jacoby's, is actually playing in that game. He is
Who's in the finals?
That's what I'm going to tell you. It is Northwestern College is playing the Northwestern Raiders against Kaiser University, and Kaiser University is in Florida. So it's the Northwestern Red Raiders against Kaiser University, and this is actually a rematch of last year's championship and all in that space. But yes, it is the and Elon used to belong to that particular division as well. But like I said, there is a hometown favorite. I think that he played actually at Millbrook, which is over there in Raleigh, but his mother has been very much involved in a number of leadership things, including things with American Tobacco and even some of those things that Nick likes to go to, like those hackathons and things along those lines. So definitely that is something that is going on. And like I said, the game will be played on this afternoon at 12, and Kaiser is actually the number 3 ranked team, and they're going against the number 1 ranked team in that particular division, NAIA. And like I said, that'll be kicking off at noon.
Are people able to make it NFL from the NAIA? Do we have any examples of
Excuse me?
do people make it to the NFL from the NAIA?
I believe that they do. They make it from all kinds of divisions,
Make
and
it
there have
from
definitely been, I think, a couple of players. I'll look that up, but yeah, I think that there have been players that have definitely made it from Division 3, Division 2, and a number of other things as well. So I'm actually going to look up and see what the NIA alumni look like,
Yeah,
and
the
all in that
University of
space.
Tampa.
And just really quickly, we had a red carpet event, as y'all can see. I'm at a Haiti, and I'll be here most of this week, if not all of this week. But we had a red carpet event because many people do not know this, but the Lone Ranger and a number of other people was actually somewhat based on a famous African American lawman named Bass Reeves. And there was a Paramount Plus series that just had their closing this particular weekend. And actually, the lady that plays the wife of Bass Reeves is actually from this area as well. She's a Hillside alumni. So Lauren E. Banks is a alumni of this area, and they did a whole red carpet with her father and mother putting that together. Her father is a pretty prominent attorney here in this area. I'm sure you know him, Steve Sherrod Banks. So definitely that is part of what they call the firm, and they always do a big African American lawyers activity on around Christmas time. So they actually just did that this past Friday. Yours truly was not able to make it. And speaking of folks making it on trips, it is my understanding that one of my coworkers, and I wish Toby was here because I'm curious to see if he went to it, but there was a big hackathon that was taking place in Atlanta that involved a lot around computers, AI, and a number of things like that. And my coworker, John Frazier, went to that. And I also had some friends who went down there for the Celebration Bowl, which is the championship of the African American colleges. And last year, Central won. This year, it was Howard against FAMU. And it is my understanding that FAMU definitely defeated Howard fairly handily. So, hey, your teams from Florida are doing good, Nick.
Florida's good.
Yep.
You know, on just the international front, the South African oil fight is over. Venezuela and Guyana decided not to.
I did hear that.
Yeah, that's sad. That means media has nothing to report on that anymore. So I'm going to delete them from our feed because there's no war.
There may still be a war. Don't give up on that war. You may still get your war yet and everything.
You know, they're not going to fight over oil. What good are these people? Okay, $34 trillion debt is still real. I was at Steve's house, Washington, D.C., last week, Steve. I went to the Hill to testify in front of the Department of Labor. And they're creating this fiduciary rule, which is not a fiduciary rule. They're just attacking CD annuities, which is stupid. It's like saying CDs are bad for you. Okay. So I was attacking the rule because it's stupid and they shouldn't be wasting all their time on it. Then I reminded them the biggest threat to retirement security is sitting down there. It's 34 trillion in debt. And not only that, your Social Security guy, ARP, goes, well, we're not going to reduce Social Security because they're going to go to the US government for money. The government's broke. Now what are they going to do? They have no plan. Okay, so then we go to Q&A. Guess what? They totally ignored me. Seriously, you know? And I'm going like, oh, I see. Is this how it works in Washington, D.C., Steve? When they don't like what somebody's saying, they just ignore you. So I had to form my responses as a question. So I said, did you see how much damage you guys have done? Have you done a study on how much damage you have done when you last passed that fiduciary rule? Because what I saw was, and I'm in the industry, 14,000 people quit. In other words, all the financial advisors, a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them, they just mass quit working in the retirement area. Oh, no, we haven't done a study on it, and time's up. And then they left.
Yeah, so they left
in all Washington, D.C., you know.
Hey, well, speaking of Washington, D.C., I also had the pleasure of talking to, and we had some technical problems, but they were recording it as well. So I'm going to try to get the interview that they gave me, but I had the pleasure of talking to a leader of the Hebrew Israelites. So they actually came by the center and we did a interview. And like I said, they taped it themselves. So I'm going to try to get the copy of that tape, but they were actually talking about the notion that they might be the original Jews and all along those lines. And they also talked about this conspiracy theory about the United States and Israel being in bed together and a number of other things. It was quite an interesting interview. They actually made the idea, because some people would say that they are black separatists, that the mistake that we made after integration was not creating and maintaining our own businesses. Because I know one of the quotes that the gentleman said was that when we found out that we didn't have to drive in the back of the bus, we should have bought the bus company and owned our own bus company. He has some other interesting quotes as well.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, just to answer Steve's question, and we'll get into a lot of these deeper conversations and everything. But yes, you ever heard of a gentleman named Walter Payton? He played for an NAIA school and everything. He actually played for Jackson State University, which would have been NAIA, and also Jackie Slater. It was a player that had a career in the NFL. Damon Harris was at William Penn University in Harlan Hill. So yeah, there have been a couple of folks that made it from NAIA, even Robert Brazil as well. So yeah, there have been a couple of folks that have made it, including some that made it to the Hall of Fame, because Walter Payton is definitely a Hall of Fame athlete.
Well, he was one of the best in the NFL. I mean,
yeah, he was what they say, a good player.
Everybody wanted to be Walter Payton doing pickup football after school, right? I mean, I remember being Walter Payton trying to pretend, right? Well, that's great. Well, I look forward to that game. I wish I could go watch it. But the other one that I saw on TV this morning was congratulations for Texas for winning the National Volleyball Championship for the women. And I tell you, it's something else to see those women play volleyball. And I really wish we televised more of the women's sports, you know, basketball, volleyball, both NBA, women's NBA. We just don't do it enough. Or even the collegiate championship for basketball.
Steve, yeah. You've not been watching our network. I actually get regular feeds from some of the things that are going on. So
I need to start doing that. I'm so plugged into the news.
We actually do broadcast a lot of that on the Pod TV network.
Yeah.
I watch some of these games. I don't know where Mark gets them from, but the thing is, he gets these games that normally don't get any love and attention, and he puts them on the network. It's just like chess. Don't get love and attention, but it's on the network. So we have a lot of interesting things.
Steve, I would much prefer beach volleyball. It's much more attractive.
I'm sure you would, Mr. Starr.
We carry some of that as well.
Wouldn't all of us, Mr. Starr?
Speaking about chess, there are several tournaments being broadcasted at the same time. And the quality of broadcast, at least the one that Carlsen just won, the Champion Tour, it was second to none. It was comparable to British Premier League broadcast. It was phenomenal quality. So,
hey, Sasha, I've got away from chess, but on world issues, I've got a question because I know you study investments and all along those lines. And I had seen an article, which we did not get to, that says that all oil and gas prices are jumping as apparently BP, which we know is a major gas company, has stopped Red Sea shipments because of those attacks by the Iran-backed Hezbollah and all along those lines. So I just wondered, is this something that we're going to see a surge in? Because I know that historically speaking, the holidays around Christmas and New Year's is when the prices spike no matter what's going on in the world. But I'm imagining with the global supply chain and things along those lines that it might even spike greater and everything. Even though it is my understanding, this is one of the things that the Black Hebraites brought up, is that Israel is actually looking at getting in the oil game, which means that they will not be dependent anymore on the Arab countries. So it looks like they're getting ready to get into the oil game as well, is what these gentleman was telling me. And this was a first time hearing about this because he was mentioning how they have the nuclear bomb and now they're being geared to be in the oil game. But what's your thoughts about the prices and will we see a spike?
Mark, do you see the interdependence of the Red Sea, essentially blockade or close to it, and Venezuela attacking Guyana? Do you see anything in common between these two things? You don't.
I mean, one it comes down to supply and demand, and a lot of that is what.
No. Okay. Thank you. Okay, here's what's happening is what needs Russia? Russia needs as high oil prices as possible so they operate and make much more money from their oil and gas trade. How to make prices go higher? Okay, here is a war, here is attack on Hamas or against Israel. There are so many things happen. guess what? Oil is going down. That's completely against any logic. So you have to press further. Okay, Venezuela, you do this thing. Okay, this Yemen, the Hussites, okay, you do this thing, and Iran is behind everything, and Russia is behind Iran, and China is behind Russia. So the world is a wonderful place. But that doesn't change anything.
But Sasha, it's
Oil
interesting.
will go down, down, down.
No, but Sasha, it's interesting you say that because I know that we have gentlemen on here that are very much into the notion of cyber and what cyber is doing and all along those lines. And the Iran gas stations are saying that they've been hit by a cyber attack of all things.
Right.
So that's what their oil minister is claiming. And they're actually saying that it was an Israeli linked hacker group that did the attack. And that they are saying that it hit 70% of their gas stations and all along those lines. So I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts around the notion of cyber impacting our gas, just like it's apparently impacting the Iranian gas and all in that space, because they are literally blaming the Israelis for this cyber attack. Anybody?
Rick has it.
So to get off of oil, let's talk about Israel. So the vast majority of Americans and Jewish Americans, including me, want Israel to survive and to thrive. But the whole world has been a little distressed about how, well, the culture, like in America, we know that some police departments are shootier than other police departments. They have different cultures. And over the past couple of days, Israeli troops shot 3 hostages who were giving clear signs of not being Palestinian. They had their shirts off. They were waving their shirts over their heads like white flags. One guy was red-haired. They were yelling, "We're hostages," in Hebrew at the Israeli forces, and they still got shot. And so I think most people, want Israel to prevail, want Israel to take out Hamas. Israel's killed close to 1% of all the people in Gaza now, and has lost. So that's 19,000 people. Israel has lost about 110,000 troops have been killed in the invasion of Gaza. And people want Israel to be more cautious in its prosecution of the war.
Yeah, but along those same lines, Rick, one of the things is that our Secretary of State, that being Mr. Austin, has gone over there and he's had some very blunt words as well. As a matter of fact, he recently predicted that Israel could face, quote unquote, a strategic defeat that would leave the country less secure if it does not do more to protect its civilians. So you are correct in saying that a lot of people are wanting there to be a humanitarian effort in what's going on and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that sense. And if there is some pushback from around the world where folks are definitely, as you said, want Hamas to be destroyed, want Hamas to be gone forever and all along those lines. But they definitely are seeing some very brutal things that are going on in the war. And we know war can be brutal just in general, but there's definitely a push for people to want it to have a humanitarian effort and everything. So anybody's thoughts on that? Because I have seen many folks that are pressing that humanitarian side.
Well, yeah, I want to do that before I take off. I'm going to try to come back at 11, but I'll take a stab at this because I spoke extensively on this on PBS for almost 40 minutes. It was a hard interview. And I think that the challenge is that, we first of all, we pray for Israel and we pray for Palestine. And I think one thing we need to understand that Israel was attacked on October 7th. And in defense of they've launched an attack to get rid of Hamas. But the challenge we've had with peace in this region is that we've had patches of peace. And when I say patches of peace, let's go back and look at history for a minute. I took a lot of classes at Emory when I was in college. I actually attended some lectures from former President Carter. We forget, when Israel offered Egypt the Suez Canal, which had a lot of oil. Then you had the Camp David Accords. Israel in 2000, that was in 1978. Israel offered Palestine up to 75% of their territories, and they still didn't work. And in 2005, Prime Minister Sharon pulled much of the troops out of the Gaza Strip, and everyone thought that that was going to lead to just a long-term peace, but it ended up making, it gave the window for Hamas to come in 2007. At the end of the day, what I'm concerned about right now, and we don't talk enough about this, but I brought this up on the news on Friday, there could be some lessons learned from the United States foreign policy after 9/11. I know Sasha Starr did make a good point that you can't really compare 9/11 to this, which I agree. But if you look at the response, the United States went after the Taliban, which resulted in a 20-year war and 2,500, probably 3,000 soldiers dead, and a war that cost us $8 billion. Let's also realize that we went into Iraq for weapons of mass destruction, which we still don't think even existed. And I'm concerned that if these hardline efforts continue, Bibi Netanyahu may not even, I don't think he'll be in power much longer. But even if he does survive, think about the enemies he's made across the world, the Arab states. I mean, only 10 states in the UN today, countries support Israel. So anyway, that's all I have to say is that but I don't see it changing. As long as Bibi Netanyahu is in power, there will be no ceasefire. There will be continued bombings, and many, many Palestinians are going to die. That's the bottom line. As long as Netanyahu was in power.
Yeah, but
he's not backing up.
Steve, you raised the point that's even part.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sasha.
I've seen the movie Golda. And she said, when warned by people like Kissinger and others, that there will be, if they will not stop the war, Yom Kippur War, when they were already miles away from Baghdad and from Cairo and so on, they were beat a shit out of all these Arab armies. And he said that, well, there will be upheaval around the world. There will be knots of protests if you will not stop it. And you know what she said? It's better to have notes of protests than condolences. Okay? It's a power game, baby. One country attacked another country. So others are strong enough as to follow up and defeat. They have to defeat Israel. Otherwise, they will be defeated by Israel. Tell me, please, anybody cried when Germany attacked England and then Russia and then was allied forces against Germany? Anybody cried that, oh my God, there are some civilians are being killed. Oh my God, stop the war. Stop it right there, right now. No, that was a real war. One power against another power. Let it go in to settle. Hamas has to get out, discovered, have to get out of their holes and fight Israelis, not hiding behind civilian population. That's why there are so much collateral damage, because unfortunately you cannot be so much precise as they kill only Hamas people without harming Palestinian people. It's next to impossible. Maybe
But
it is.
Sasha, to your point, what country attacked Israel? Because it's my understanding that, as I said before, and I'll say it, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It does not represent Palestine.
Mark, I don't buy this. Sorry, it's Gaza. Whoever is in Gaza, there are Palestinians and there are Hamas, or there are Hamas and Palestinians, or mixed of all those. It doesn't matter. The attack happened from Gaza, where the Hamas was government, or was it government? Oh, it was not elected, it was not approved, it was not this and that. A hell with all that. It's a power game. Is Hamas able to fight Israelis? Get out of your holes and fight. Take your arms. You want to get killed. You want to become martyrs. So please do so. No, they're hiding in these holes behind civilians. And yet they're saying what great warriors they are. They want to all die. Just get out and die, please.
But I'm gonna get to Jacoby because I did see Jacoby's hands up and everything. The only thing I would counter to that is that if you remember, if you want to go back in time, there was an attack on an Olympic game, and everybody said that it was terrorists that attacked the Munich Olympic Games and not necessarily a particular country. So I would make that parallel to what Hamas did. I do not think it. I think it was a terrorist organization that made the attack and not a particular country. But Jacoby, your point.
Think of how we have to preface every one of these conversations. And it's sad that we have to preface it the way that we do, because you would assume that we're all starting out at the same place. And we seem that we cannot even agree to be at the same place. Every time we start this conversation, we start off, Israel was attacked on October 7th. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Why can't we all agree on that from the start? Why must we repeat it? Because then we forget that what's going on afterwards and what happened before. We only focus on that one tidbit of information and forget about the context around everything. Again, we know Israel was attacked on October 7th. We all agree Hamas is a terrorist organization. Gaza isn't a country. Gaza is a territory. It is not even recognized as a country. So to say that Gaza attacked Israel is factually false from the start. Hamas, a terrorist organization, attacked Israel, not the Palestinian people. But who's suffering the consequences of what Hamas did? The Palestinian people. How come we never, and this is why it goes back to what I said, we preface everything. We all agree that Israel should be able to survive. Israel should be able to defend itself. The Israeli people, they have a right to life and should be able to live their lives and be happy. But the Palestinian people are the same, but they are not even in the forefront of our discussion, and they're the ones who are suffering the worst out of this whole conflict. We can point to October 7th. We can talk about the Israelis who, how Hamas has used rape and all this other stuff as an act of war. That's what the Hamas has done, not the Palestinian people. But who's suffering? The Palestinian people. They're the ones they're caught in the middle of the whole bombing between what Israel is, trying to go after Hamas. And yes, Israel should destroy Hamas. But again, how far must we go in that? What is the end game? Because this is what the Secretary of State was even talking about, how he even talked about how Steve was just talking about it, how the less humanitarian this looks, the more this pushes and creates more acts of terror later, because you're pushing people to retaliate or to think of these other ways. And it sucks, but that's the reality. When we went in after 9/11, we did create a lot more terrorists. And that's why when Al Qaeda was gone, ISIS pops up and these other organizations pop up. So
but it's also hard. But there's also the point I was trying to make, and the point I was trying to make before we go to Sasha, is that there is a cost involved in terms of being able to manage these settlements. And when you look at when we went in to occupy Afghanistan, when we pulled out, which was a failure of the Biden administration, but it was also a failure of Trump as well. We just said we're going to pull out, and look how quickly the Taliban went back in. So as the region is unstable, you have those are the reasons why Sharon pulled out. Sharon pulled out because of the demographics of the region, because it was predominantly Palestinian, economic considerations because the cost of money of managing those settlements, right? Also international pressure from the United States, and everyone said, but then look what happened. They pulled out, and two years later, Hamas takes over. So I do think there's foreign policy lessons learned here, that we need to look at to say, but anyway, let's go to Sasha.
Unfortunately, this is quite a futile conversation. Israel will do only what fits Israel. Israel will not deal with all kind of pressures, international or otherwise. That's all noise. The real thing is, it's a war. Whether Gaza is a territory or a country or whatever it is, the attack originated in Gaza. So whether you take it as a country, you take it as a territory, it doesn't matter. That, whatever it is, whatever it might be, I don't know how to call it. I call it Gaza, but maybe there are some other names. That Gaza has to be completely destroyed. And if Palestinians, they want to survive this, and they're not guilty of anything, so on, just give up, raise your hands, get out of your holes and say, we resign, we capitulate. This is a start. Hamas will be destroyed one or another, even if they will give up some hostages. I mean, most of them are, let's face it, most of them are not alive today. Most of them are being killed and tortured. So whoever are alive, maybe 5-6 people, okay, Israel will take them, but it doesn't matter. They all have to be annihilated, prosecuted, let's face it, killed, period. Yes, Ali?
Yeah, I got a question for you. This is a concern I have. After World War II, the Nazis, how did we make sure that the next generation, we're not going to be Nazis also? We went in there and we changed the education system. We're not changing the education system in Gaza, so I'm concerned. This has nothing to do with Israel. This has something to do with the Gazans themselves teaching generation after generation Jew hatred, Israeli hatred. They teach us in the schools. Of course the kids are going to grow up and be like this. Even if we get rid of Hamas, it's not going to help.
Lee, and you know who is supplying these books for which they're
the UN.
UN.
No,
Absolutely.
the UN is not.
Absolutely. So you have to take.
Of course they are.
No,
You have
the UN
to
is
take
not.
UN out of these territories, Gaza and others. UN are nothing but criminals, and they have to get out. The same as the Red Cross. Red Cross is serving purely Hamas interests. As a matter of fact, they're all people from Hamas being even hired. Even if you will see, okay, I was watching this when they freed the hostages and this Hamas, Red Cross vehicles, they were coming to give Israelis hostages. All drivers, all the personnel, they were all Hamas people with their hairdresses and so on. So it's a mockery. A Red Cross, the United Nations, and so on. So thankfully, they're so weak and they're so what's the best word for it? Would be impotent. That you can ignore that once and for all. They are impotent organization. Why would you deal with impotent organization? Would you deal with impotent men for anything? Probably not. So the same thing with this organization. They're complete impotent idiots. That's all there is to it.
To answer Lee's question and to agree with Sasha, after World War II, the Allies occupied Germany with 1.6 million troops for 4 years, and we gave them a ton of aid to help them rebuild. Germany passed laws to make Nazism illegal. There were probably millions and millions of old Nazis still around who probably still believed it, but they learned to keep their mouths shut. Gaza has never had competent governance, nor has it had a competent occupation. The last time Israel occupied Gaza, it was with 9,000 Israelis. That wasn't enough. There needs to be neutral governance and in force to stamp down Hamas. There just needs to be competent governance, and the record of that area doesn't inspire confidence. I want to bring up something else, which is the U.S. economy, which is some people are saying it's the strongest economy in decades. Inflation has dropped, unemployment's at 60-year lows, but national sentiment is still very pessimistic, and people are trying to explain that.
Toby, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just to point out, also to tag into what Lee also said when he pointed out that the individuals were being taught, and Rick pointed out tremendously how the occupation and how the humanitarian and the people staying there for 4 years taught the Nazis, even though it did not take away the whole belief, because anti-Semitism is still out there, and that's still rooted in there's neo-Nazism still out there. But in Gaza, and you're talking about the parts of the education system where Hamas is still teaching individuals that Israeli people are evil, when they see people bombing them, that is telling them the same thing. When they see people,
Jacoby?
hold on. When they see people blocking humanitarian aid, and those are Israelis that are blocking humanitarian aid that they see, and the same thing with the bombs that they see, that is just that's confirming what they're being taught. So what you're doing essentially, instead of doing the actual humanitarian portion and pushing the humanitarian to the forefront, you're actually confirming and creating. You're actually establishing and deeply rooting that this is truly what I've been taught, and what I've been taught is true. So it becomes that confirmation. We see the same thing happen here in the States with the whole, if you look at everything going on with the MAGA party, that is what happens. They see things, they get confirmed, and those confirmations get stuck. And you cannot argue that, Biden is not actually dead and this is not a puppet in reality. They find something to hold. It's the whole, I think it's called confirmation bias. And that's what people search for. So in Gaza, what you're talking about, if you're not sending in the humanitarian aid and that is not the forefront, and they steadily see people dying and steadily see people and get blamed for right or wrong, the confirmation bias happens, and that gets deeply rooted. And then all you're doing is creating more terrorism down the line. That's
hold on
all.
Hold on a second, Jacoby, just to point out and to kind of agree with you and all along those lines. I just wanted y'all to see this article, because this was definitely one that even talked about what you just alluded to, and all along those lines, because it actually brings up, and make sure I got the right one, and all in that space, this notion of there being neo-Nazi groups even here in this area. As a matter of fact, it said that that's the other one. So hold on one second. Yeah.
And think about, honestly, the whole Biden impeachment thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing there, but all they're throwing out there is red meat for confirmation and the continued lie.
Yeah, but just to give some examples, that's what I was going to say. Because you look at this article, it says in late May, a group of young male neo-Nazis converged outside of a bookstore in Bozeman, Montana, to protest a drag queen story hour. Later that day, they hit another similar event in Livingston, Montana. The second weekend in June, the group targeted the Lewis County Pride Festival in Central Washington.
Mark, you're going to find one-offs everywhere of every hate group. I don't understand your point.
It's more than that. I mean, they're definitely saying that it is a rise in the white nationalist movement.
Yeah,
that has been risen over the last 3 years and everything. So that has been, they're taking their message into the public. So that is my point, is that there is a rise of this type of stuff that is taking place as well. So it's not just one hate group that is going on. It is several hate things that are taking place. That is the point I was making, Lee.
Jacoby?
Yeah.
You mentioned two things. You mentioned about the bombing, and you also mentioned about blockade. It's my understanding then, if they hate the Israelis because of the blockade, why don't they hate the Egyptians also? There are two blockades on Gaza. Am I wrong? And in terms of the bombing, what more bombing could have been done than us bombing Japan? The Japanese don't hate America because of the bombing.
Lee, there are plenty of problems with the Japanese internment camps and the bombing there as well. Then on top of that, if you talk,
I didn't bring up the camps. I brought up the bombings.
That's still all part of it. But again, if you're taught to hate somebody and then that person doesn't use smart bombs, but 50% of the
that's exactly my point, being taught to hate.
Listen to what I'm saying. You're being taught to hate, and that individual that you are taught to hate then kills a bunch of people that you see.
So why are they teaching them to hate them?
Let me finish. That confirms why I should hate them. To
Jatovi,
that individual, that is what goes on. It's
Jatovi,
confirmation
a
bias.
very quick point, but if you kill them all, there will be no more
That's
hate.
genocide. That is
But there is no
genocide.
more hate. Okay, that's fine. But
That's
there's no more
genocide.
hate. Everybody loves each other. Life
So
is
even
wonderful.
worse,
Okay.
what you're actually calling for
Sasha and
is even
Jacoby, I have a
worse
question for both of y'all.
than anything. You are literally saying that
Jacoby?
this whole section of people should die. Hamas is your equal in saying the same thing. So
Okay.
what you are advocating for is the exact same
Jatovi,
thing that you are
Jatovi,
saying that you're fighting
the
against.
point is that both Hamas and Palestinians, they have to go into submission. They have to get on their knees.
Now you're talking about
to
creating
ask-
slavery.
They-
You're saying that the
okay, that's
Palestinian
fine.
people
That's
should be
fine by me.
enslaved to the
They have
Israeli
to
people.
go on their knees. They have to ask forgiveness. They
No.
have to complain.
No.
They have to confirm that there will be never attempts to harm Israel, and there will be always at peace with Israel. And after that, Israeli can make their move and accept
Incorrect.
it. Okay? But that's how it's going to be done. There is no other way.
But
There will be
that
a lot
what
of dead
you're
people,
arguing for
or
is
you have to.
incorrect.
Germany
That
stopped the
creates-
war by
that-
capitulation.
That creates more terrorism.
Germany capitulated on the May 8th, 1945. It completely capitulated to Allied forces. That's what stopped the war. In this war has to be exactly the same thing. Complete capitulation of Hamas, Palestinians, Gazans, whoever they are. Complete capitulation, nothing short of it will end the war.
So 64% of Palestinian families have had a family member injured or killed. More than 90% of Palestinian families have been driven out of their homes. But how people feel about it later depends on the follow through. Those percentages are similar to what happened to Germans in World War II. But as people said, Germans don't resent America now. They didn't resent America much in the 50s because there was occupation, there was rebuilding, there was re-education, there were new laws, anti-Nazi laws passed. So if somebody gets into Gaza and does a good job after the war is over in helping rebuild, in keeping Hamas stamped down, there's a chance that the next generation of Palestinians will not be belligerent against Israel.
But Rick,
Rick, do you see that happening realistically?
But
Do you see
hold
that
on.
happening?
They've never had, nobody's ever done a good job of occupying and pacifying Gaza.
But Rick,
So,
Rick,
no,
hold,
I don't
Rick,
see it.
Rick, hold on a second. But to your point, there is a gentleman that is thinking about being reelected president. He's already said that he wants to be very isolationist if he gets into office. So that means that he's going to, keep us in our confines and not have to deal with these conflicts and all along those ways. Because
You mean Trump?
Trump has said that in his second term, he will install loyalists in key positions in the Pentagon, State Department, and the CIA, whose primary obligation would be to him, allowing him more freedom than in his first presidency to enact isolationist policies and those kind of things, which would have us not being engaged in these conflicts and everything. So I don't know.
Isolationism lets the bad guys in the
Plain-
world
Plain,
extend their reach.
Yep.
Yep.
but playing devil's advocate, what I heard playing devil's advocate, and it's hard because I am a moderate Democrat, but being a political commentator, especially now on PBS and a few other stations, I have to make sure that I'm looking at both sides. But what I'm hearing from moderate Republicans as well is that they now are saying that the world is actually less safe after 4 years of Biden than when it was under Trump. And I know I disagree, but what they're saying is that, we didn't have Hamas attacking Israel. We didn't have Russia attacking Ukraine. We didn't have all of these things going on. And
Steve?
I don't think it's fair
But
to
we
blame
did have
Biden,
in
but
Syria and other countries.
I'm just being really fair that that's the argument, that the world is not safe anymore with Joe Biden in the White House. and we need to put back Donald Trump. But then Donald Trump
Angela.
was isolationist, and I don't think it's good to be isolationist. So
How about
I'm
you?
just stating what I'm hearing out there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just concerned. It's horrible what's going on in Gaza. Okay, period. Okay, the Gazan lives, the civilians that are innocent, period, horrible. But why the laser focus on what they're doing, Israel is doing there, but no one gave a damn what happened in Syria? Hundreds of thousands of Muslims were killed by Bashar Assad and others. No one gave a damn. No marches, no rallies, and nothing.
Actually,
Why now?
There were a bunch of marches. There were a bunch of rallies.
I don't remember seeing them.
There was pushback.
I don't see college campuses. I didn't see them.
Lee, there were people upset about what's going on. That actually came right after the whole Arab Spring stuff, which kicked off on Twitter, and that was the whole Egyptian rise. So there was a whole bunch of things going on during that time. And on top of that, remember, we were told, there was a line that was supposedly crossed with the chemical gas and everything. There was a lot of problems that were going on at that time. And right now, to what Steve brought up, and that is the big talking point that is used by many Republicans, and that is one of their talking points that they're going to use for a while, that and the border, to push back on that. In terms of what was going on during Trump, the whole world was shut down because his actions on COVID. Then on top of that, he actually helped create the problem that's going on in Ukraine by not actually helping Ukraine and actually trying to blackmail Ukraine for information on Biden. Therefore, Ukraine was struggling to get aid and get actual proper protection. So therefore, he helped kick off what was going on there. And then the other situations in terms of the Abraham Accords, actually, there were Muslims that were still upset about what was going on with the Abraham Accords. So leading into that caused a little bit of uprising and strife. Sure, things did not kick off until Biden, because if you talk about what happened with Afghanistan, the pullout was also partially due to what Trump had already signed and agreed to. Therefore, Biden he had his hands tied. His actual actions and how he removed people, yes, that was a problem. But again, he had his hands tied. Then when there were also the treaties and agreements that Trump had pulled out right before he left office.
How did Biden have his hands tied? He's a big boy.
Because Trump had withdrawn troops down to 2,500 total U.S. troops in Afghanistan by the time he left office. He had to be talked out of pulling everybody out by the last Christmas he was in office. 2,500 troops was not enough to hold Afghanistan. And the only reason the Taliban held off on marching on Kabul was because they knew this withdrawal was in place. And part of the deal was, we're going to not take the country to give you guys time to withdraw as long as you hold to the agreement, which Biden more or less did. The agreement set up by Pompeo and Trump.
So there were issues already. But again, that gets into the messaging and that gets into the nuanced talk. And individuals don't want to listen to the nuanced talk, or they just want to get that talking point, and they'll hold on to that talking point because again, I'll reach back to what's going on right now with the whole impeachment of Biden. If you look at what Kushner had done and what Ivanka Trump had done, because Ivanka, as soon as she got in there, she got 20 trademarks released from China. Then on top of that, you got $2 billion that Jared Kushner gotten. The Republican Party is so silent on that. But of course, they're making up issues with Biden and this whole impeachment stuff that's going on with there, because there is nothing there with Biden, but they are trying their hardest.
Are you serious? There's nothing there with Biden? Nothing at all?
Lee, what is there with Biden?
Him and his sons in Ukraine.
No,
you got it on tape with him riding
hold
Ukraine. You're not going to get the $1 billion.
No. Everybody, every Western nation that you're talking about this $1 million thing and getting rid of the person investigating Burisma, the whole Western world It was actually a policy. The whole Western world wanted that gentleman gone. not Biden.
Shokin, yeah, Attorney General Shokin or Prosecutor Shokin.
Yes.
The whole world wanted him out, including Republican senators. Now,
Yes.
Democrats, some Democrats are saying, yeah, bring on the impeachment, because they remember that when Clinton was impeached for lying about getting blowjobs, his approval rating shot into the 60s, that people thought it wasn't fair. And people are hoping that the ridiculous impeachment of Biden may do the same thing. But that was, what, 25 years ago, and things have changed. And, you know, the media is much more polarized, so we can't, you know, count on, you know, an unfair impeachment necessarily helping Biden.
Hey,
And the crazy
hey
part
Rick, and
about the
tell me
whole-
just really quickly, because I brought it up. I was going to bring it up again and everything, but I brought it up in past shows. How much do folks on this panel feel that we should be impacting or going on other governments and everything? I mentioned the isolationist policies that apparently Trump wants to institute should he be elected. But we just said on yesterday that Chile voted on a conservative constitution, and apparently it's going to it was going to replace the dictatorship era charter that they have with the kind of free market stuff that they wanted to get into place, as well as reduced state intervention, and even some limiting of women's rights will not be taking place because that proposed conservative constitution was voted down. So if we see that, and I'm not saying we do, but if we see that is wrong, or if we see some of the mutilation things that take place in Africa and other things, how much do you think that we should be playing a role of being the police and kind of even the moral arbitrators and everything? Because that's part of the conversation, even with what I was saying earlier about what the Palestinians are being taught and everything. So how much should U.S. try to dictate other people's morality?
We do better by being Santa Claus, by being the world's friend, by giving aid instead of like meddling in the world's politics. Because we have a pretty spotty history of doing bad things in foreign countries, but we also have a long history of doing a lot of good. And so.
And what's the old saying? You catch more flies with honey.
Well, this has been
So
really a good.
I mean, if we focus on the humanitarian side of things, just like Rick said, being the world's friend and not the world's, hey, we're going to be rule with this hard stick and you better. No, that's a crazy person, and that creates
Absolutely. I'm gonna
There is a point in time though you should cut the dollars if they're not have culture and ways of life that we want them to continue. If we're funding terrorism, that's not a good thing.
No, I mean, I agree. Economic sanctions and all the
Look at
other
Iran.
stuff. So,
but hold on a second, Lee. To that same point, I mean, there are principles and there are traditions that we would find apparent, but they are a part of those cultures and everything. Do we have the right to tell people that if they are doing as part of their rituals of what we would consider mutilation, that we need to stay in those kind of lanes? And
I get that, Mark, but we shouldn't be funding countries and enabling them of terrorism.
again, I think we all agree on that, and I think the issue, Mark,
we don't all agree because of the Iran deal, for example. We disagree on whether it should have been done or not.
Again,
what does Rick have to say?
The economic sanctions should.
I was just going to bring up another point where we've lost. I feel like we're losing the propaganda, international propaganda war. We used to always hear about Radio Free Europe, and I don't know what happened to that. I guess it's still there, but Russia has concerted propaganda efforts that have been very effective in helping to make Western democracies less stable, more angry. And I don't hear anything about what the U.S. is doing to, do like pro-positive propaganda throughout the world.
Rick, just answer your question, because we can look it up and everything. Radio Free Europe is actually Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. Now, it does still exist. The current president is Jamie Fly, and their headquarters are in Prague and all in that area, but they do still exist. And apparently, this person has been the CEO since 2019. And you are right; it was founded in 2050. But yeah, apparently they are still out there and they are still providing messages.
Also, one of the big things, and Rick, also to the point, you're spot on, and I think a lot of that you're talking about in terms of the pro-positive messaging, that got killed under Trump because of his antics and his lunacy and what he kept putting out and how he attacked people on Twitter and so on and so forth. Because if you remember, and don't get me wrong, regardless of if you like his policies or not, when Obama was in office, you had nations and world in love with that man. So there was a positive feeling from America at that point just because of his actions, how he spoke, and how he related to people. But when Trump got in, the way he acts, and even now, that got tossed into the wind. And it's harder to start that ball moving now because of his actions, and still the actual Republican Party and the stuff that they're pushing and how they're attacking different countries. And since we're going to Sasha next, how the Republican Party is not even wanting to support Ukraine, who we as a nation said that we would support. So those positive things.
Let's go to Sasha, and I'm going to have to close out. Sasha,
I would like to mention that there was very thought out, coherent United States foreign policy, starting from Truman's Second World War and going all the way until Trump. Trump is the most cancer-like, unfortunately, a situation for United States where it's so seriously destroyed U.S. foreign policy, U.S. perception of what is the world and where is the United States place in it. Everything is being destroyed. Today's political class is, most of them are just worried how to get reelected. They don't really subscribe to certain point of view, certain U.S. policy, foreign policy, including or domestic policies, nothing, just to get reelected. This is why majority, all these House in United States, they are 99% pro-Trump. Why? They love Trump? No, but that would help them get reelected. This is why they're all pro-Trump, and this is a cancer on U.S. body.
Right. Sasha, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and close out real quickly. I want to thank everyone for being with us. My final insight. Go ahead, Rick. Please. We only have 1 minute left. Please.
Goodbye.
Okay. Real quickly, what I will say is that as all eyes are focused on Israel, we often forget that we are in the middle of another major war, Ukraine. And I want to remind everyone watching today, and we're going to talk about this later in the week, that there are two main changes in the war which should concern all of us. The first is that Russia has increased their support, their defense much stronger, more trenches, more landmines, and they've been able to more successfully fight off the Ukrainian resistance. The second thing is that Putin knows that if he can hold off just a little bit longer and Donald Trump becomes the president, then you can pretty much assure that United States support of Ukraine will be gone. There are already some Western countries that are wavering in their support. But let us never forget that if Putin is successful, the entire international-based rule system we've had in place would fall awry. That you could invade another nation and not even be punished for it. Fareed Zakaria had a good idea that I think is fascinating on his last show, or a few shows ago, that we perhaps could actually use Russian frozen assets to reinvest in Ukraine, to rebuild Ukraine, about $400 billion worth of these assets. Now, the challenge is they're in many different parts of the world, but it could be a great way to show Mr. Putin that even if Donald Trump wins re-election, that he still will be in danger of a stronger Ukraine. I think it's something all of us need to look at very closely. And I am very concerned that we're not even hearing much about Ukraine in the media anymore. So all eyes are on. Thank God we have Sasha Starr on this show to continue to inform us. But the point of the matter is, Ukraine is in danger. They could lose this war still. It could slip right from under us. And the world will be a much, much less place with a Russian dictator who has now pretty much anointed himself to a 5th term. Make no mistake, Vladimir Putin will be there until he dies. And unless he's assassinated, this ruthless, maniacal dictator, the likes of Adolf Hitler, will continue to kill and murder in the name of his nation, which does not do Russia any good. We'll be back for another edition of World Edition tomorrow. Thank you all so much. Be safe wherever you are. God bless each of you. Thank you.